Hey everybody, welcome back to Walk Along the Beams. Kind of like episode 8, right? Or 4.5. I don't know how you want to call it, but we'll get there. But technically book 8, The Wind Through the Keyhole. Um we have everybody here except for Philtastic. He's probably running late, and then our boy Namman, and he's still in recovery. Um don't have a lot of people to say hi to yet, but that's great. We'll get you as you come in. We got Las Cruces. What's up, Las Cruces?
Hey,
And
James.
we got Robin.
Robin.
Hey, Robin.
Robin, Las Cruces.
Trev, Steve, Aaron. Y'all ready to talk about this book, man? Y'all ready? I'm super
Let's
excited. I
do it.
don't know about
Let's
y'all.
bring it.
Ready.
So this book was written after he finished the book, and it's kind of like he felt like he had some more story to write. Um, the foreword of the book starts out like that. And it's basically Stephen King giving you a brief intro, explaining to the reader where this fits in, how it ties in, kind of thing. What's up, Bud Files? Glad you can make it. Um, and then right after that, he gets in the story. Unlike the other books, this one is structured in a very unique way. It's only like 4 main chapters. We got our boy Philtastic hitting the stage. What's up, Phil? Perfect
Hey,
timing.
everybody.
Hey, Phil.
Hey,
How's
Phil.
it going?
But this book broken basically into 4 different chapters. We got Stark Glass, the Skin Man, then we got the Wind Through the Keyhole, and then we got the Skin Man, continued part 2. So my bios are a little longer because they're not small chapters broken up into, but I'm just gonna get into it. So Stark Glass, we join Roland and his quartet, Jake, Eddie, Susanna, and Oi, directly after leaving the Green Palace in Topeka, Kansas. So for those of y'all that are not caught up, this is directly after the 4th book when they, in between them walking from Kansas to Caliburn Sturgis is technically 4.5, even though he wrote it, after 8, after 7, sorry. Um, So, leaving the Green Palace in Topeka, Kansas, they are en route to Caliburn Sturgis, blah, 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 and come to a massive river and a ferryman, Bix. Gaining travel across the river, stories are told of the Tet's adventures, and Bix's stories tug at Roland's memories. With weather change and a changing Oi's behavior, Bix warns Roland to heed the signs, and Roland remembers a book from his childhood, magically tells of the Eld featuring a story within. The Wind Through the Keyhole. Biggs tells of the Stark Blast and Bumbler's special talent making it across the river. Biggs tells of an abandoned town about 5 miles up the path of the beam, warned to watch out for Oi turning around in circles. The Ted is explained by Roland what the Stark Blast is. They make it to the Gook, which is the town's name, and Oi start spinning. They collect supplies and bunker down in a meeting hall building. Starkblast comes and Roland is demanded to tell a story that he states one is nonfiction and one is fiction. Um, and that's where that massive chapter leads off. I know I summed it up like really, really. It is a massive chapter. Each one of these are. There's a lot that goes into each chapter, so this is kind of like a brief summary. My first question for this particular, that goes into this. All right, after finishing the tower run, right? We finished the loop and everything. Um, was this difficult to go back to emotion wise? I mean, after the Dark Tower, if it got you in those emotions, especially on the first read, was this easy or hard to go back to? Was it wanted, kind of thing? Um, I'm gonna go directly to Aaron first.
Well, I guess how it
um, starts right off with Roland explaining more about his mother. In the beginning, it was hard. It kind of like hits you emotionally right away in the story. So it does, like it kind of, yeah, I guess it kind of did hit me harder like right away in the story, and then after it kind of settles in, and I just felt good reading it.
Let's go with Philtastic. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, at first I had a real hard time getting into it because I was like, look, I've reached the end of the story, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, at first.
Why am I looking at this? Um, it wasn't until, and to be fair, a lot of what you say in this first chapter, what you've covered, you covered it pretty quickly, but it felt very kind of long and drawn out at first. Like he took his time getting to this spot. And look, I know that King has a tendency to be extremely descriptive, and in this sense, this was King at his best. However,
Yeah.
when it got into the actual storytelling, I really felt like I really kind of shifted my attention, and I was more interested in hearing about the story than what was happening to the group at that point.
What about you, Steve?
The first time I read this book, right after I'd finished the book 7, and I came around to this one, I was freaking annoyed with this book, and I hated it the first time I read it, and I like stopped halfway through it, and I just said, "Okay, fuck this, I'm not reading this book." And then if it was a little while later, I came back to it and I read the series again, but I did it in order.
Mm.
So instead, I put this book in 4.5 where it's supposed to fit in. And then I read through the whole book and I went, oh shit. Because like Phil says, he's runs on and he likes to run on. But
Mm.
then when the story picked up and I read it through for the second time, but for the complete book, and then carried on with the rest of the story, and then I thought, you know what, this is actually good. It fits nicely. So I was happy with it. But yeah, pissed off at the start.
Trev.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that going back to it, you know what happens after it. So kind of like what Phil was saying, our quartet, we weren't really, looking forward to anything that they were going to do, but the story. And I kind of see what Aaron was saying backstage. Like if he would have made this while he was making the other books, it would have lost a lot of people because it would have dragged the story on. So the way he did it was perfect, just to add some more context and get across a couple different points I think he was trying to make.
I like that. I like that. What's up, Darius? Thanks for stopping by.
Okay.
Um, I want to say not to the same degree as Steve because I finished the Tower Run much later after the book was released. I didn't read it right away. I saved it, and it was gonna be like a holy grail that I saved, and then we hit some really hard times in the world, and I was like, screw it, I can't save it no more. I gotta read this thing. And so like by that time. This book was already out, so I instantly was like, "Man, I gotta see what this book's about." I mean, this is kind of way before it was like spoiled out or anything. To me, I was like really lost on the direction of the book, and I want to say it was almost like that where I didn't stop reading, but it was at the same time like, why is this the story that he wants to go back to, kind of thing, like. And I did, I wanted more Susanna and Oi, and incidentally, you don't get a lot of them. You do. I mean, this chapter's massive, and we're with our main quartet. But what really happens in that time? There's a lot of like describing where they are, what's coming, them talking to Bix. Even their explanation of what they went through before they got there with Bix is just a background thing. It's like, yeah, we explained everything up until this point. Um, I mean, the main juice of the story is like the younger Roland and then the fairy tale, right? Um, no, but I love the story. It is so different, but and I haven't read it in the 4.5 thing, so I don't know like how it fits there, but I still love it. I don't know. All right, next question. So the entire novel is structured like a Russian doll. It's a story within a story within a story within. I mean, technically, there's five. Two of them are really small, with five stories within the story that Roland is telling his quartet. They get to this place. They gotta hunker down for the Stark blast, and it's just like, hey, I'll tell you the story that happens to include this massive other story, and then there's another story that happens um, why structure it like this, and does it work like this? I'm gonna go with Phil.
I mean, it definitely works, and I think it's almost like a trying to think of the best way to say it. It really has a way of just kind of drawing you in, because look, at this point, if you're reading the story, chances are this is not your first encounter with these characters. And I mean, again, being that we're reading this after the first story is complete, it's kind of like, well, why are we reading these characters again? We know what happens to them. So it's like, okay, well, I'm going to pull you into a story from my youth. And this is something we all remember being young and telling stories, kind of draws you in a little bit, and then draws you in a little bit more. And it's interesting how it is structured. You said like a Russian doll. I felt like it was Inception. It was like a story within a story. Yeah.
It's
So,
the same model as Inception.
yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
But it does do a good job of drawing you in.
Trev, what about you, my other new reader?
He pretty much just said what I was going to say.
Yeah. Anybody else got a
that's like
different opinion?
the first thing. One thing that I want to say, Stephen King reading this.
Oh, okay. I forgot
Yeah.
to mention
And
that.
forever, his name will be Stephen Deschain, not Deschain. Like I refuse to say Deschain. It's Deschain.
No, and he
sounds
himself pronounces it normally Deshane. I don't know why in the audiobook. Okay,
really?
and yes. Okay, and this is another thing. Like he kind of forgets and go into okay, so like the audiobook. Yeah, I am in total agreement. I love Stephen King. I love his voice. Like, no, him reading this audiobook was not. It's probably the worst audiobook in my opinion because of him, and it's not because he's like reading it bad or anything. It's just there's not a whole decipherment of the voices really until you get to the wind through the keyhole and you start like I'll give him kudos. Like Walter's voice is badass, and there's one other character in the voice where it doesn't even sound like Stephen King. I want to assume they're
was
voice
pretty
actors.
good.
But
yeah,
but
The way he read Vic.
Like overall, most of the sheriff and deputies, they all sound the same. You kind of have to like really be paying attention to who's talking to who. Stephen King is not a voice
But yeah,
actor.
overall, he didn't do that well. He needs to stick to writing. He's not a good voice actor.
What did he say that I messaged you about, Mike? It took me out of it. I forgot.
I don't remember.
He said something like, I think he said something like titties, but the way he said it,
like
it was like your grandmother saying it.
No, I don't need Stephen King saying titties.
Titty bang bang. Titty bank. Titty bank.
I don't even remember that
Titty bank.
Oh,
So
when he's
that's a
talking to
Frenchman.
Jamie, in the beginning. Okay, with his dad. I gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Trying to be a Frenchman or something.
Sorry, I didn't mean.
I mean, he's awkward when he says like a lot of stuff in the book. I mean, just the names, and they're his creations. Like you're not even saying the names that you gave us right. Like, who is this Stephen Deschain? Is that a new character? Like
he's chained to his desk. He's a desk chain.
He's the anti-gunslinger.
I found this this book was really. I like how Stephen King brought us into the story, then into the next story, and then into the next story, gets us ingrained in all that, and then resolves each one on the way back out. That was really cool how he did it. But I liked how he was telling this story to tell the other story about the Stark Blast, because it came to him when they were running for their lives to get into that building, and how fast this thing comes, and he should have seen it before, because then he remembers the story of his youth. And in that story, he was telling the kid about the other story. Yeah, those freaking Russian nesting dolls, eh?
right, Aaron. What about you?
Yeah, same thing. Overall, yeah, just layers on layers and shifting on shifting. Everything shifts and everything has layers. And everything's a wheel.
Right, full circle. I want to say it works for me. I do love the structure of the story. Like it it reads really fast, okay, and like and it goes in levels because it starts us off with the most boring stuff, and then it kind of increases and then increases. Um, for me, it works, and then on top of that, it's like I'm not a huge fan of non-linear storytelling, but this is kind of like an untraditional way of telling, like because it's like he's telling a story from his past that is, about his past, from a book that's way in the past, but for me, it works. Yeah, another thing is that it's like a hat trick. This is one of the only times that he's done this within a story, and it's kind of one of the only story structures that he hadn't done, and especially for it to show up in the series. The whole series been a mixed bag of genres and structured stories. Every single book is structured differently, but they're all structured after a major type of storytelling. Um, this one being the last one that he hadn't used.
Yeah, this was the true fairy tale genre within the Dark Tower.
Um, the Stark Blast is a metaphor. What's it a metaphor to? I'm gonna go Steve with hardcore.
Wow. I don't know. Metaphor. The Stark Blast coming down.
Okay.
Oh, Trev's got it.
Massive storm.
Pass.
All right,
Massive
Trev,
storm.
what you got? What you got?
The time slowing down, everything's slowing down and dying and decaying.
I can go with that.
Sure.
Phil, you got?
I hadn't thought about that, to be honest with you. I didn't pick up on it like that.
The death of magic. I don't know. Or maybe I guess Dark Blast. No, I don't know.
I don't either, but it is a metaphor. um, no, technically it is a huge metaphor in the book, but as
I
far
guess
as
there's just like maybe Mother Nature, like there's unstoppable forces that you can't foresee, that that you have to be ready for at all times. You never know, like always be ready for Mother Nature. Maybe it's Mother Nature.
I want to say like a couple things to add to this. Okay, one, it's the first time really within the series that we've actually got to see like a natural weather phenomenon, whether it's natural in nature, like a weather within midworld kind of thing. It's also like an instant death kind of thing. Like if you're not prepared, and people that live in midworld, like as the story goes, they're supposed to know this. Like everybody we meet in this book that sees the signs knows exactly what this is, and we're talking about muties know what this is. um, the fact that it takes a structured out story within a story within a story for Roland to remember this kind of thing, which is not like that. He remembers it after talking to Bix, and Bix brings back the memories of his mom and him, being read these as fairy tales. But context of like story importance, like I don't know. There are a couple things that elude me in this book. The Stark Blast being, what does it actually represent? Yes, you could say it's just a storm, but I mean, you're talking about it's an enemy within the book, within multiple parts of the book. So it's not really just a storm.
Is this the longest that the group stopped in one place since they started their journey?
No, besides Wizard and Glass, because Wizard and Glass is right before this, and Wizard of Glass is double the book. So you have to imagine it took twice as long to tell that story, kind of thing.
And you also kind of get a feeling it's not random because it happens every how many 20, 30 years or whatever.
Yeah, they talked about that.
But it's
And
obviously happened at crucial times in Roland's life. So you have that coincidence that might not be a coincidence.
It's interesting.
And the fact that it happens like technically once they kind of cross over to like enemy lines, you know. I mean, they just left the Green Palace, Wizard of Oz. They did the whole click in their heel things, and then all of a sudden this massive storm, like kind of like a tornado, right? Because that's the way it's issued into the story. It's a
Yeah,
tornado
of
that's
cold.
drawn to the beam. Yeah. What's up, 25 press? Thanks for
So
showing
you're
up.
thinking that maybe the storm is being controlled? It's part of
Mm,
the anti-cog that's coming after them, trying to get them.
well, we did just go to this Green Palace that had a Wizard of Oz. Both forms, right? We got the bum hug version, which was the TikTok man,
The
and then we
humbug.
got the humbug, right? And then we
Humbug.
got the bum hug, and then we got Walter right after that, and then this happens like right after that, Kansas baby, and then it plays such an important part of like the whole story, right? So is this like, because that is kind of stated in the book that this isn't necessarily in like a natural structured storm. That's kind of part of the reason they believe it happens so often. So could this be something that the old people, maybe started and the Crimson King's using?
Yeah, because it came down fast. Because
Walter.
remember the ferryman said that he had plenty of time to get back.
Mhm.
But I think that he probably got blasted in that damn thing because it came down sooner than they thought it would.
And a lot of people, just when they encounter this in the story, they don't really realize until we get the whole Throcken thing, right? I mean, it's not, you think that the knowledge of this, they would start seeing the earlier signs before the bill, because there's tons of signs before the temperature dropping, the swells of wind, like
Hmm.
just the sounds and nature before this thing gets to you.
It kind of
What's
reminds
up,
me
Hack Attack?
of an anime that I watched where one of the villains was controlling the weather and it sucked him up in it and he became the weather. So
Yeah,
like he couldn't really like he's kind of trapped in being just a force of nature.
that's cool. We had a big, massive ice storm up here probably a decade or so ago. And the sound that the ice and the trees were making, I could imagine what that start blast was like. When we had that freaking ice storm, it took down power lines. We'd go outside and we'd hear the trees doing exactly what he described, the creaking and branches just breaking off because everything was frozen solid and it happened so fast.
I just think of that movie, like what was it, 2012, when the freeze
Yes,
comes
same
in,
idea. And
and
that shit
that's
happens in reality in the north.
ugh, not a death I'd want. I mean, at least it's instant. I mean, it's instant. There's no,
Hmm.
there's
Shoot, Walt
um,
Disney did that for money. Didn't he cryo freeze himself?
supposedly.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So he can be resurrected in the future. When they have the technology, put his little head in a jar like in Futurama.
Mhm.
So my next question: we get to spend a good deal of the first half of the book simply traveling with the Ted. Did any of this add any depth to the characters that we already know from the main story? I'm going to go with Phil.
No, no, not for me. Again, I felt, kind of hot off the heels of finishing the story. It was kind of like, okay, we're here.
Trev.
Same. I don't think it really added much to the main content.
Aaron.
I just think it added more lore to gunslingers. That's all.
I think it was pretty cool with
I guess,
Jake.
yeah.
They were showing, Jake going off on his own and kind of being a kid and meeting up with the ferryman early, and
I forgot
Suzanne
about
was a
that.
little worried about him. I thought that was kind of cool. It was a little bit of a building of the characters, not a lot though. I mean, we still knew stuff, but it was kind of nice seeing Jake being a kid again, right? And kind of exploring and doing his own thing. And
A
Roland wasn't
lot.
worried about him because he's trained well, so he's a gunslinger now.
I want to say the answer for me is no. It doesn't, like, especially this part of the story. And I love every step of this journey, but like it's we spend a long time with them, but there's not a lot of like dialogue between them. There's not a lot of like you do get those moments that you just referenced, but there's not too many of them. Like, I was kind of hoping for a bigger thing with the voice since they kept referencing that. I mean, the
Yeah.
rocking is a huge thing throughout the book. I mean, I feel like that was like a failed opportunity. Maybe it had. I feel like as much as he kind of did the whole Thraka thing tied with the Cold Start, that there was going to be something major, coming with both or either or, kind of thing. But as far as it, like, I mean, this book specifically is world building for me. It builds more into mid-world and Geely than, but as far as adding to the overall story, I'd say no. I mean, it really doesn't. Like, you could read this book or not read this book. Does it, are you missing anything or does it add anything? The answer, I think, is, no.
I
And
think it adds one thing that's crucial to Roland's story
well, the ending of the book,
with
yes,
his
of
mother.
course.
Yeah.
But that's a good question. We'll get there. We'll get there when we get there. All right, so let's move along to one of the bigger parts of the story, the Skin Man. The story starts directly after the death of Gabrielle Deschain. Roland is given a mission by Stephen Deschain to go to Debaria City, tied to Gabrielle's past. Told to go with Jamie DeCurry and to report to the High Sheriff Hugh Peavy and to hunt down a Skin Man, a shape changer. Riding a smaller train, Roland and Jamie travel, and eventually the train gets derailed, leaving the train behind. Um, they travel and discuss the case about different folks having been attacked by different animals, lions, tigers, and bears. Oh my! They make it to the Abbey Sisters of Serenity, and those are not the animals. One of the animals being an alligator that attacked one of them. Yeah, but that was just for fun. Okay, but they eventually make it to the Abbey, Sisters of Serenity. They meet Evelyn of Serenity, the head lady, and is shortly introduced to poor Fortuna, a victim of the Skin Man that happened to survive. Fortuna recalls her account with the Skin Man, the guns, and it is brutal. Like, I think she's kind of explained that she has like basically half a face. I mean, like left over, like, she wears a veil to conceal it. I mean, at one point she's just like, man, I hate the Almighty because he didn't take me, kind of thing. Now, what happened to her is horrible. What happened to everybody that encounters this thing is horrible. Um, the gunslinger had to wait. Fortuna recalls her account with the Skin Man. Like I said, it's pretty horrible, very graphic. The gunslingers head to Sheriff Peavy and hear a story about Stephen Deschain in his younger years. Remember that story? A lot of people forget that story. Yeah, but there's a whole. We stop the story and we get into the story where we actually hear a backstory about Stephen Deschain going up against this gang. Of the Crows and their augmented leader, which he kind of turned out not to be anything. Um, But after spending some time discussing the case, Roland and Jamie piece together um, this who the Skin Man might be. It might be a salt miner that lives in the salt place. Roland and Jamie head back to their newly acquainted shack and sleep. Roland dreams of Gabrielle reading the wind through the keyhole. Roland and Jamie are awakened early by a phone call on the dingle dangle or the jingle jang, right? Another attack. The Basically the phone call is another attack on the Jefferson Ranch, and it's a loss of speculated at first to be 20 some odd people, but later referenced that it was actually 3 dozen some odd people were killed. Um, Through their investigation, they find a boy, Bill Streeter, son of the cook of the ranch. After hearing Bill's story, which is very little, Roland comes up with a plan, sends Jamie and the police to the Saltmans looking for a salty that can ride, has a horse, and at the same time spreading a rumor that they have rescued a kid that has seen the Skin Man and knows his identity. Roland and um, Bill head to Debaria, but they stop at a shack where Roland hypnotizes Bill, learning that he did know something vital, that the Skin Man has a blue ring tattooed around his ankle. Roland and Bill head to the jail to keep Bill locked in a cell, like a jail cell, safe. After dropping young Bill off, Roland heads to the blacksmith for a special bullet. Roland heads back to the jail cell and tells Bill a story, the wind through the keyhole. like I said, the big long chapters. Um, don't really have any questions on this part because it's pretty much a flat out like drawn story from like Roland and Jamie once they get on the train to up to the point to the end of this chapter. It's pretty much like beat for beat. We go here, we go here, we go here. Almost all the information and also, but most of it is like a MacGuffin and a MacGuffin because they don't even have to. It's supposed to be a detective story, right? But they don't even have to do any detective work. It's like they make it to this place. All these people tell like of their victims and of this. They get to the sheriff. He tells them this part. But I mean, they just pretty much piece together what I guess and it's kind of funny. Like all it would have took was the sheriff to go talk to the sisters to go talk to the victims, and they kind of would have came up with the same conclusion that it's assaulty. Um, but hey, gunslingers, right? I
I have
like
a
to
question
comment
for you.
about. Yeah, go ahead.
So I know that throughout the series we've been told that Stephen King incorporates characters and whatnot from other works of his. Is the skin was Skinwalker Skin Man?
Okay, so I guess I can ask this question now related
Okay.
to this. That this was going to be a question for my later on. Okay,
Okay.
so in this Dark Tower book, we actually have no other literary references besides references that we already got, like a small reference to Wizard of Oz and a small reference to the Bible. But other than that one, this one is not chock full of people that know literary sources or mention other books. Or on top of that, this one doesn't have really anything that's connected to any of the other Stephen King books like we've seen before, like Pennywise
The
or
only thing that kept making me wonder was the Tommy knockers
aha,
because of
that's
the
where we get
green
to
light.
this. The very small connection is the humming green light, and I want to say you could be right. You could be, if you've read if it bleeds. The skin walker he is kind of like a skin changer because he takes different forms, but in that book he also gets his power from like a greenish glow kind of thing. So I want to say it could be a nod to either Tommy Knockers or maybe both. I'm not sure.
Well, I was
But
gonna
other than
say
that,
is it the same as the creature from The Outsider?
if it bleeds, kind of the same.
And it
Um,
could have been maybe the green orb of Merlin's rainbow.
Another possibility. But okay, so with this knowledge, why the absence of it? He's going back to the Dark Tower. The Dark Tower has this huge literary pool, music. Like, I mean, we've seen bad guys from Marvel and Warner Brothers, and like, why none of that in this book? And not even that, but no other like Stephen King heavily like connected. And this is a free for all. Any thoughts on that?
My thought was because
Everything within the story is already so connected that it would just convolute everything even more to try to connect things more.
Okay.
yeah, I mean, my thought was that I think this is more of an insular story. You don't need to set the time and place. You don't have to set the mystery of where they are or what earth are they on or whatnot. What reality are they in? This is supposed to be just about this story within a story within a story, and that's it. And I think that's why it works in the end.
I want to agree with you 100%, and that's where I was going with this question because the truth is in the book, right?
Mhm.
Every other Dark Tower story or every other Stephen King story. I mean, he's one of my favorite reasons, but he is massively descriptive, and I love it. But in this story, we don't get a lot of massive details about the towns that we're in. I mean, we go to four different towns almost in the city. We go to like Gook and Debaria, and we go to like Tree, and we go to the Endless Forest, and we go. They're not massively described as they are. I mean, you're talking about in the Gunslinger. He describes Toll like down to the tumbleweed, you know. Um, so I want to believe it's something like that. Like it is an secular story and meant to be like that. Like maybe he had taken enough fan comments about, oh, you're over connecting your own books, or maybe it was something like that. Was you know I kind of missed that out of this story. I wish there was kind of like a little more, like you know, like maybe the Skin Man directly connected to something. Like we could guess it was Tommy Knockers, or we could
Yeah, the
guess.
Skin Man was just a random miner. Like I was expecting this Skin Man to be like, somebody of importance, maybe, or connected to something else.
I was hoping there was going to be a twist and it'd be like multiple Skin Man.
Yeah,
I like
that would have
that.
been
I
cool.
never thought. I never thought of that. I just kind of took it verbatim for what was put in front of us, kind of thing. But I like both. Like that
What
the
about the
Skin Man
creature? The creature it
Pennywise. What about it?
Pennywise transforms.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but he
He's a
feeds off of like
shapeshifter.
emotions. And this
He
guy
eats
doesn't.
fear. Yeah, he's kind of like that creature in book 7, right?
This guy wasn't just feeding. I mean, it gets into that, but he was having sex with. He was getting down, and that was after he was eating.
I'm
He
almost
was
thinking
he.
this book he needed some money, so he created
He
a.
took on the shape of only animals, and I
Yeah,
was wondering if there was a connection maybe to the beams
Is there
with all
now?
the different animals on the beams, but then it just didn't seem like it because he was changing in the animals that aren't on the beam.
there is, and there's a question that I have related to this that's coming once we come back to the Skin Man Part 2, and I'll get there because it's a major question that maybe while reading you don't really think about, kind of thing. But for our
Mhm.
new readers, they might be missing some information. I'll fill you in when we get there. Um, so let's get to our next big half because honestly, this is what this book is really about. I mean, the chapter is titled "The Wind Through the Keyhole," right? Um, so let's see. And this one's long. I'll have to break it off in parts because there's a lot that happens in this. Okay, so once upon a by, we hear a story about a family that lives near a great enchanted forest, the Ross family. Big Ross, Nell, and Tim, their son, at 11 years old. Big Ross is a tree cutter and works in the endless forest. With wood in high demand, the woodcutters go out into the forest that is filled with tons of monsters, including dragons. But they don't work alone, they have a partner. His partner being Big Kells. Tim lives a peaceful life, and we find out he has promised his father's lucky coin, his axe, his plot, and his home, and jokingly his mom too. Sadly, one day his father is killed by a female dragon, told to his family by his partner Big Kells. Losing their moneymaker, Tim tries to work at a sawmill and also goes to school at the same time, being taught by the widow Smack. We learn that taxes play a huge role in this story, and making a horrible mistake, Nell marries Big Kel. Shortly after being wed, we see that Big Kells is a woman beater, a drinker, a kid beat. I mean, this guy's got like a whole list of stuff, but he's just not a good guy. Um, uh, the world gets real bad for Tim and Nails until the day finally arrives that our dope ass, oh man, the tax collector, right? Okay, so comes to town for reasons unknown. He wants to speak with Tim and gives him a key. Told after using it to come see him in the forest after dark. With only two locks in the whole city of Tree, Tim opens up Big Kale's lover trunk, which that's what I call it. His lover trunk. Um, and Tim finds his dad's coin and axe in the trunk after being told it had been burned by dragonfire. Tim goes to see the taxman, and we meet a Pookie, and Tim receives a vision of Big Kale finding the trunk open and beaten Nails blind. Also finds his dad's dead body and learns the truth. Tim makes it back. Kale has fled. The widow Smack is nursing Nails, and the woodsmen are searching for Kales. Tim heads back to the taxman, but not before the widow Smack gives him a four-shot pistol. The taxman sends Tim to find Merlin, that is somewhere within the forest with the promise of a cure for Tim's mom's eyes. Told to follow a Sig. Tim follows the Sig, and she leads him into a deadly trap, and this time with alligators and a real dragon. Um, Due to his quick thinking and bravery, a tribe comes forth to the aid of the newly named gunslinger. The Phagonom tribe, more plant like than human, gives Tim food, a boat, and a disc, gives him warnings, and Tim goes on the path of the beam. Shortly after departing, we learn that the disc is a guidance system built by North Central Prostronics uh, named Daria. Actually, as soon as he learns about Daria, when he learns about the light and that she can talk and all that, that's actually my favorite part in the book. I must have listened to that like 60 times. And specifically, it's when the Billy Bumbler's behind him and it does the whole yark. Like, okay, for one, because that's real life. Like, I've actually been out of the forest, been camping, and actually had animals do that. And like, that's literally like some real reaction that a small mammal would have if they got scared behind you. Or no, but just his like okay, and his audio reading is bad, but the way he does the yark with his like main accent, bro, that shit just makes me laugh. Like the whole scene, the way it sounds. Okay, sorry. Yark. Okay, during his journey, he is followed by Billy Bumblers heading towards the North Forest Kinnick Dogan. He encounters the Billy Bumblers, or I should be calling them Throckins because he does not use that term at all in this book, Billy Bumblers. He just straight up calls them Throckins throughout the whole story. Once Roland remembers this long ago childhood, he's like, "Oh yeah, Throckins." All right. He encounters the Billy Bums doing their Stark Blast ritual. During his journey, he encounters many obstacles like poison mushrooms, massive plant monsters, but learning the Star Glass is the real terror. Barely making it to the Dogan before the storm hits, Tim comes across his biggest obstacle, a huge tiger in a cage with the key around its neck. Two keys. Tim, needing both keys and fearing for the tiger's death of the oncoming storm, Tim opens the cage and gets both keys. Making it inside, finds the other key, opens a box which contains a bottle of liquid, a feather, and a napkin. Using the magical napkin, which we find out pretty quickly, it's not just a napkin, um, to ward off the cold, the tiger and Tim sleep. They awake. Tim uses some of the medicine and reveals that the tiger is actually Merlin of the Eld, and that he was trapped in that form. After hearing of the why he was trapped and the how, Tim is rewarded and told he will be a gunslinger. He flies back to Tree City using the feather and the napkin with instructions for the medicine and the axe. Makes it back, cures his mom's blindness. Widow Smack is killed shortly after by Kales and almost kills Tim. Saved by Nails with Big Ross's axe directly in his head where it was supposed to go. Once Upon a Buy, and that is the end of The Wind and the Keyhole. And like I said, that's a massive part of the book. Let's say hi to some people real quick. What's up, Rich? What's up, Chicago? Thank y'all for coming through.
Schultzy.
Um, this is actually my favorite part of the book. For me, I love the fairy tale feel of it, the way the fairy tale fits within the lore kind of thing. Like, I mean, you get halfway through and find out this kid's a gunslinger. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things I do love about this story. Um, I would, and I wish Namman was here for this one. Okay, one of the literary, like quotes we get in this book is during this story, and it's actually a reference to the Bible with the John 3:15 reference. Does anybody get the reference, meaning, or reason, like why we see it there? What does it pertain to inside the story? And this is really a free for all because I do not have an answer to this one myself because I don't get the meaning of it. The meaning, it's explained right under the sign, but does it pertain to the story? And I can't see that, so why throw that in there, kind of thing. And then on top of that, the sign reads that it was signed by Jesus, right? The man Jesus, because he finds it in a cave after he survived like the plant monster thing. So like it's not like something that was on the beaten path. So I kind of imagine that like at some point in time, the man Jesus just kind of came through and was like, like let me write this sign of damnation, Any thoughts on that?
It's kind of funny because John 3:15 it says, "Thou that whosoever believe in him should not perish but have eternal life." So that's kind of funny right there. So who do we know in this story has got eternal life that just keeps rolling round and round and round?
Well, I mean,
Right.
we know Jesus didn't sign anything, so
No.
that whole, yeah.
Okay,
That's
well,
interesting.
like in like context terms, like Walter set up the whole trip, right? I mean, so did Walter put that there? Is like, and then on top of that, like for Tim not to know the reference, like why put it there? You know?
Now Walter's a horrible trap setter. They just keep
Okay,
getting through
so
them all the time.
I don't know. Walter's not really. He doesn't do it to get rid of him, though. He does it to make him fight through something.
Yeah, to entertain himself too, right? He's entertained by all this shit.
what's up,
So,
Tina?
I think
oh,
he
Tina,
has his
you're
own.
Genius. She made it.
Walter's kind of his own thing. I don't think Walter's really.
Well, this leads into my next question. Okay, so
He's
let me
a
ask a
freaking
question and we can talk about it
sociopath.
further because, okay, so think about the reasoning for Walter to do this and the steps he took because it is explained why he did it, right? It's explained that he's trying to find someone to kill Merlin. In the story, we find out that he could trap Merlin, but he didn't have the magic to kill him. So the whole like when it comes to Tim and what the tax collector started, it's all set up to get this kid to go kill Walter, right? I
Mhm.
mean Merlin. So I mean, okay, now think about all the steps he took, right? And maybe you really haven't thought about all the steps he took. I mean, we're talking about he went to the Fagnon tribe and talked to them to give him the disc. Like he knew where Merlin was. He went that far. We're talking about many wheels were traveled during Tim's journey. I calculated over 200 and something, and that's the numbers that they gave us. So I'm pretty sure it's a lot. This dude's on foot. You know what I'm saying? Like this is a long journey. Okay, so like even from the beginning, just him following the Sig. The Sig is a death trap, right? Like the Sig is
Yep.
like straight out of a fairy tale, and it's one of those
Literally.
instances where you're not supposed to follow the light, and he's following the light, and it's leading him to his like God, like right
Doom.
on set doom, like to the point he's just la 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 la. I love this fairy, like hell yeah,
She's
and
cute. She's naked. She's showing me all her body parts. It's
Hmm.
great. I
Her
dig it.
all
hair's
right.
going across her breast, and then it moves away. He's ah.
So here's a real question on all this. Okay, so think about all this. Okay, and I really want y'all to think about this. What was the point of getting Tim to do this when you had Kales right there? You're talking about the tax collector started this in the beginning. He was there even before Kales killed Big Ross. It's explained in the story that this is just something that Kales come from, but that motive is never there. It's because of this fool. It all starts with Walter, and at some point you have to imagine Walter met Kales, convinced him for some reason to kill Big Ross, like, oh, you could get the girl. And then on top of that, when he gets back, he doesn't really want the girl. We find that at the end, he just had some kind of like weird magical hold. Okay, so like, why Tim? And like and how okay more further into the question, think about this. Merlin was in prison for a long time, and we don't even know how long, but more than 100 years. So was this the first time that Walter had tried to do this? I mean,
Probably not.
most bad guys want to kill the hero right out then and there. So like, why this whole huge setup just to get Tim to do this? And if that's the case, like, how many other people had he got trying to do the same thing? Is there even evidence of the story? Is Tim just the first? Like, why
Maybe
is Tim?
maybe that it was um basically the
Yeah, keep
red
going.
trying to cut off a gunslinger being born.
That's the way I see it in story, like plain out in your face context, right? We know the Red King's doing that, but like, I mean, but but then you think about all the steps it took just to take out this one gunslinger when like Walter at any given time could have just Alakazammed him, shot him. Like, I mean, if it was that important to take him out, and if anything, it's not. When you read it, it's not that. It reads the other way, right? It reads where Walter's been helping this dude. That well, Walter sent him on the path to go find Merlin to like release him or whatever. Because it's okay in context. It's not specifically stated that Walter trapped this guy. It just says that like some wandering hermit caught Merlin when he was drunk and magically overpowered him and changed him into a tiger. It's not necessarily stated that this was the tax collector Walter or that trapped Merlin. It was just an enforcer of the Crimson King, but not the Crimson King himself. And Merlin does reference like the tax collector by, you know, characters. So I want to assume it might not have been Walter that trapped him, but still, like,
It makes it seem that way.
mhm. And but going into the whole like context of what we know from like because there's never really been a time where like it seems like Walter's trying to hurt Roland's like journey, but really in the end he's really just helping him along the way. Like he literally like tells them like, hey, like in the very first book, they sit down and palaver, and he's like, hey, you need to go do this and this and this. Like most bad guys don't do that. They're not like, hey, guess what? You're gonna go on this journey to do this. Oh, you didn't have definition of your journey? Well, here's definition of your journey. Oh, and guess what? You need a crew, and this is how you're gonna get the crew. You know, most bad guys they just kapow and shoot you, steal your money. Like, you know, they
I
blow
always
up the
thought of
world.
Yeah.
I always thought of him as being like because all of his evil underlings, like the TikTok man and other people, I can't think of any other people that worked for him, but they were always kind of weak. He really didn't respect them. Like part of it has to do with, I think, a challenge to him. I don't know if he draws power from the light, from corrupting the light or trying to manipulate the light, but I think he definitely enjoys the
The
whole
game.
game of it.
You guys got to remember.
Man and trying to break the beams.
You guys got
But
to
it's,
remember that the red is chaos. It's chaos. All
yeah.
of it's chaos. So they don't
Well,
see themselves as good or evil. They don't define
Right.
themselves like that. They're chaos. They sow
yeah, that's true
chaos,
too.
and whatever
True.
Ka takes, it takes. They enjoy the game for what it is. The game is the game.
Mhm.
See,
But
the thing
like,
about Walter, I think that you have to keep in mind too, is that he's never been that bam, shoot you, you're dead type of guy, villain. He's
No.
been he's kind of like almost like the Joker in that kind of sense, where
Yeah,
he wants to
exactly.
play with his food, you know.
Yeah.
So maybe like an
So,
antichrist
yeah.
with
Sowing
like
the
the
chaos.
biblical reference for Walter.
so, but, but, I mean, okay, so you have this guy, right, that has foreknowledge of the story, because Walter does to a certain point, to his death, right? He knows that this kid is going to succeed, kind of thing. He knows he's past this point. Like, his actions literally like brought back a major wizard into the world and a new gunslinger.
Hmm.
Well, you know what Steve just said about
I
the
like
red
the
being
chaos.
chaos, kind of leads me into like a bigger thought I had on the entire series itself. I think the Dark Tower is not so much about getting to the Dark Tower; it is about the journey. And
Mhm.
when the reason it resets, basically, whatever role Roland has, it's not his job necessarily to keep the tower up. It's his job to take these travelers he meets, the quartet, and put them together or put them somewhere other than where they are. In that sense, I think Roland is order, whereas Walter in this case, then being the opposite, or even the Red King, would be chaos. And the bottom line is, I don't think Walter really wants the tower to fail. I don't think he wants the world to end because he wants chaos. If the world ends, the game is over. There is no order, there's no chaos. So I think it's always kind of like a cat and mouse type of thing to him.
It is. It is.
Mhm.
I do like the chaos thing, but no, but going in with what Trev said earlier, that is kind of like a thing I've just the common theme with the book and the bad guys, like and the minions and how they treat each other, kind of thing. It's kind of funny that at this time he's
The
not
bad guy trope kind of like the bad guy kind of always messes himself up.
yeah. Um. Wait, what was I just saying? Oh, it's structure wise, like he's a tax collector. He actually works for Gilead, right? Which is kind of funny because at the same time Whitney had been like Martin Broadcloak, the sorcerer. I mean, this is at the same time.
It was written in the book that he did this as a hobby. It was just fun for him. Did he actually take the money and give it back to them? Probably not. He just
Okay,
messing
so
with these people, more of the chaos, right?
so a theory, and I've had this since I first read it, but he knows it's a story, right? And this was a book that his mom read to Roland, right? What if he wrote himself in the book? Like maybe it
Another
was
Stephen
the
King.
tax collector, right? What if there was originally just a tax collector and he played his part or whatever, and Randall, Walter, Martin, like just made himself that? Because there's even a comment in the story about Merlin not being able to be at two places at one time that would be magically, physically impossible. And it's stated by two magic users in the book, right? Because Walter makes that statement and Merlin makes that statement. So if that can't happen, then how can he be the tax collector and Martin Brocklock at the same time? And remember, this is supposed to be
I thought the Covenant Man was going to be Merlin. I thought Merlin was going to turn into Walter, but I think I don't know, but I think that
I
would have
didn't.
been kind of a cool way to do it.
I remember reading the story, and I didn't even think he would ever find Merlin. I thought that was like the fairy tale part of it, like he was just leading him on this like endless, quest to nowhere. Especially the way the story just it goes from one like dire section to the next. It's not like a friendly then a die. No, it's like bad to bad to bad. Um, I thought the journey was just gonna kill this kid, kind of thing. I didn't, and it was kind of funny going back into the old axe cutter thing because that's a huge part of the story. There's a lot of big kales and the woodcutters and the dragons and the. I mean, once you get to the quest part of it, that's all like put to the side. And he keeps mentioning it and why he's doing the quest, but pretty much, it's the quest. And okay, so with that being said, does it structure the same as Roland and his quest? Anybody? Anybody?
Hmm.
No. Like, do you see
Mm,
Tim sacrifice and stuff? I mean, he didn't, right? He had the opportunity to sacrifice to Ariana.
he kind of got his own quartet
Hmm.
with the AI and then the Moss people and
And use them all up, just like
yep,
Roland.
yep.
Okay, even Sig, because supposedly Sigs don't even talk, and he got her name out of her.
Mhm.
He kept trying to talk to her, and eventually she was I forget her name. It's like Helenita or
See, that was a
um.
story that was told into Roland probably to try and coax him into thinking around corners and trying to help him out.
And that also reminded me that that's like the first AI that's good that we've came across. But
Directive
Another,
and
19 was
and
still there, though.
yeah.
that kind of makes me think that because magic was still in the world, that it wasn't able to run rampant, and it
I
was
think
more
it does
human like.
Yeah.
Why
make
then?
sense what you're saying though, like how Randall, well, Walter at the time was with Roland's mom, and so he could have been whispering while they were in the seat, you know, tell this story to your son and tell it this way, and he's the one telling her this was my story and put me in it as the Covenant Man.
I kind of feel like it's something like that, especially because it's coming from Roland's memory, and we start the story, and Roland doesn't have the greatest of memory. He's getting these things like come to him, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I remember that book when I was a little kid." um, but I mean, he doesn't know about the Throcken thing, I mean, so it's not like stuff that he's refreshed memory on.
It
It's just
all could just be a story that Randall Flagg made up.
well, okay. There's another comment to it, right? Because Roland says that he's going to tell a story of fiction and nonfiction. But we get through this. In the next chapter, it's explained that Tim does become a gunslinger, and he was one of the first gunslingers that had no connection to the line of Eld, maybe due to possibilities of Arthur Eld's, like,
He
if he
became
was,
legendary. Yeah.
yeah, but he was one of the first that wasn't, kind of like a Jedi that wasn't trained by the Jedi Council. He was brought in by outside force. But the way it is explained is because it's told to be a story, and then we find out that it's actually fact. Maybe that part was maybe all that leading up to how he became a gunslinger, because it's just explained that while he was living in Tree, at one point, two like hard, they don't say gunslingers, they just say hardened men roll through town looking for other hardened men. Tim's the only one that picks up the call. He fights in some big battle that they actually win, and Tim from that point on is called like the
Stout
left-handed
Tim.
gun. Yeah, Stout Tim. So that leads to another question: which story is the fiction? Which is the nonfiction? Is it the Skin Man story that's fiction? You don't even think about it after you read, and the way both stories are presented, they're both presented as truth. The Went Through the Keyhole, not so much when he starts telling the story, but the fact it's based on a real person that exists within his world states otherwise. Either it's like a myth that surrounds a person, kind of like the King Arthur myth. Maybe King
Well,
Arthur was
every
one
one of the stories would have been fiction, really, because Roland's being written in a
story
book by
within a
Stephen
story.
King.
Oh, there you go.
So
It's a fiction within a fiction within a fiction within a fiction.
I thought the keyhole story was the fake one because Merlin made the reference to how could somebody tell if it's real or not? Basically, about him and his house in the woods, and he lived.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's a
Hansel
good
and
point.
Gretel feeling.
Yeah, good point. Oh, Trev froze on us.
I think that for me, that part, it was more like storied expectation of magic, just what people didn't believe and did believe, kind of thing. Because
Mhm.
magic was already fading out of that time, kind of thing. Um,
Oh, he's back.
Hell
Yep,
yeah!
you're alive. Now freeze in that position.
All right, so we get to
Janky
the
internet.
last major part, and it's Skin Man Part 2, and that's Roland finishes the story of the young Tim and explains that Tim becomes the left-hand gun. Tim Stout lives a long gunslinger life after a drawn-out parade with the yeah, I wrote it as parade, but basically it's okay. So narrowed down to 20 salties during the dance of the parade of these 20 salties. Young Bill remembers a huge detail, and we learn of Roland's silver bullet. Um, from the salties, we learn that the Skin Man was given his powers by a humming green light that we already mentioned. Roland, with Bill's help, narrows down the Skin Man, Ollie Yang. As soon as he is discovered, he changes into a giant half man, half Pookie, Snake Man. Aang kills one of the miners and deputies in an instant, but is killed with one shot from Roland's silver bullet. They burn his body and celebrate the Skin Man's death. Leaving town for Gilead, they stop at the Sisters of Serenity. Roland receives a gift, a letter from Gabrielle Deshane with hate, love, and regret. Roland reads the letter. In the letter, Gabrielle reveals she knows all of her future, explained by Martin Brockhook, and what Roland is to do. He's going to kill her, and tells us all but the last line of the letter, and that's where he cuts off the story. Before I move on, because there's a little bit more, I got some questions. Roland believes and defeats the Skin Man with a silver bullet to the head, but this comes from, and I need to explain something. This comes from a world that Stephen King invented, right? And now I know Trev and Philtastic have not read this series that is heavily connected to the Dark Tower series, but there's another series that a huge fan favorite. It might be one of the ones that we do in the series, but that is Talisman and Black House. And within Talisman and Black House, we learn about were creatures, and not just werewolves, but there are were snakes, were rats, were all kind of were creatures. And in this world, you don't need a silver bullet to kill a were person, because in Talisman and Black House, there's a lot of werewolves, and then they die pretty much just like a person does. Like, you beat them, they gonna die. You shoot them, they gonna die. You don't need a silver bullet. Okay, so my question comes from Stephen King wrote this, and this is after Talisman and Black House, and the minute detail of the silver bullet being a small background piece of the story. Even it's set up in the story in the first part where he goes to the blacksmith, and it's literally like 3 minutes of the story where he drops off this piece of silver to get made. You don't even find out what it is, but you kind of know that it's a silver bullet. Like, okay, another small piece is this comes from Vanny's teaching. Vanny, being well versed in many worlds, would have known about werewolves and them just being like everything else. So, like, why the silver bullet? Like, especially for something that we didn't even know was technically a rare thing in the beginning of the story. That
Just
it's just
precautionary, maybe. Be cautious.
And to make
but
Well,
it
they don't.
tougher to kill because all the people that he had killed, he obviously got shot a few times.
yeah, but this were creature was created by magic. He wasn't a traditional werewolf or were creature from those other books. Those other books, those creatures were made into those things, other means, biting or born into it. This guy was a normal human being and he was transformed by that green glow, whatever the hell that thing is. So he needed something a little extra. And he didn't just turn
Mm,
into one creature, he turned into multiple creatures. So there was something else at play with this thing. So the Vanny
that
might have come across a creature like this and found that the silver is what's best to lay this thing down.
that's exactly right. It has some like, and it possibly leading to the whole like science added with the magic thing. Like, it takes some amounts of like metal science to
Undo the magic.
counterattack the magic, because it's actually a very, 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 very tiny reference to another one of his stories called The Silver Bullet. And guess what? In that story, it's about a werewolf. And in that story, there's one common thing that he has with other major werewolf stories, because the silver bullet is referenced on how to kill a werewolf, but that's not the key. The key is a moon, and the place of the bullet. It's actually like a three-part thing. You can't just use a silver bullet and shoot the wolf in the arm. That don't work. You know.
Got to
No,
get some vital.
Mm-hmm.
no. I want to say Steve knocked it on the head. I mean, you're talking about. We went through a whole like 2 books where a moon played like a major role, like almost a key character within Wizard and Glass. The changing of Peddler Moon, the Hunter's Moon, the Demon Moon.
Hmm.
Yeah, so I mean the silver bullet, I don't even think like most readers pick up on it, because they're like watching other discussions on this book, it's always left out, the silver bullet, and the reason on why like it was such an important thing for him to use the bullet, and that not even pertaining to werewolves kind of thing. It's just, the use of magic and that. Um, Anybody got anything else they want to add to Steve's wonderful,
No, the silver bullet totally just went over my head, to be honest with you.
That's a good thing because if it hit you, it would have killed you.
There you go.
All right, so in that same scene, I got another question. Why a Pookie? Why, out of all the creatures okay, bear, a wolf, um, another type, a regular snake, an alligator, a lion. Why a pookie? And a pookie is described as kind of like our anaconda slash like python. Is just a really really massive like land snake. Any thoughts on why our skin man changed into the pookie?
I mean, I would think there's got to be some sort of maybe a religious reference in there. I can't quite scratch myself. Um,
I don't know. Okay,
Trying
for
to think.
reference, I don't even know if that's a real thing. I don't know if that's like a real snake in the real world. I don't know if like a pookie is like a real type. I don't know that. To me, it
No,
sounds like a made up name that.
yeah, I mean, it sounds made up to me too, but just snake brings a snake itself brings up certain kind of symbolism and whatnot. You have a whole Garden of Eden angle there. Snakes are usually seen as these low forming or low life kind of creatures that are like the worst of the worst. Um, I mean, maybe that's it. It's just he's not the skin man is not this all powerful creature. At the end, he's just really vermin.
But you notice that in the book, when they're
Maybe
referencing the Skin Man, when he transforms, he never does the same one twice. It's always something different. And he never did like one over and over again. He was always something
That is
different.
true.
In
It
Dungeons
was
and Dragons, they kind of have some spells like that you can only do the one thing at the one time, and that's it. You can't do it anymore. You got to pick a different creature. So
maybe
he
he
maybe
had
couldn't
no
do he
control.
couldn't do any real
emphasize
creatures when
the
he
snake
was down.
to connect to the dragon in the story.
Okay, so in reference, like Ollie Yang wasn't there when the story was told. The Salties arrived right after the story is told, so he wouldn't have been there to hear that like that they knew about the Pookie or whatever. Unless, and this is a thought, unless he can also read minds, maybe, or like pull thoughts, and the
Could be.
Pookie just lingered.
Yeah, and that's how he picks the next one that he's going to turn into by whatever fear they have the most. Something
And I
like
want
with
to
it,
say,
with
and I want to
Pennywise.
say Steve, yeah, and I want to say, oh, maybe
Yeah, that's what I would
it
go with.
could be another reference, small, but maybe it's
Maybe
something they use.
he fed off the emotions around him, and that's just what he turned into.
There's something else I'd like to throw in there. Okay, so the scene, right? We have these miners, and one of them's being accused of a skin man. It's not just a regular roundup, right? Because gunslingers are present at this roundup. Normally, it'd just be sheriffs and deputies, maybe a marshal. Not gunslingers are present. So the skin man, like, if it was a chosen form, like, I mean, we could have just seen the bear. That guy would rip through, like, 30 some odd people with ease, with some with weapons and some not.
Yeah,
Thanks, sir. What's up, Tay?
yeah. Maybe he's kind of stuck that unless the person's thinking of a bear, he can't turn into the bear,
I
or
was
they're not
thinking
thinking of a tiger and they can't turn into it unless they're thinking of it. So if he was thinking of the snake, he's got no choice. He's got to be whatever creature that the it could be some determination with the magic, right? Because the magic, they always have rules or structures to them, even with polymorphing, and you got to
I was
follow
also
those rules.
I was also thinking if he could choose, maybe he chose the pokey based on speed to try and beat the gunslingers. Because during the commotion, like Jamie's action, and we haven't really talked about Jamie a lot because he's not really in the story at all. But like if you remember what Jamie did during this, he literally like grabs the dude's waist as he's changing into a snake right after the snake kills the other two guys, and it's like it doesn't really come off as a very gunslingery move to do. Like yeah,
tackle
let
him.
me try and grab this thing
Yeah, I'm
as
gonna
it's
tackle him.
changing, and it just killed these two guys instantly. Like, you think a gunslinger would do exactly what Roland did. He took a step backwards, got some distance, and then and
And
pulled his
pow!
guns. You know.
And we deal in lead.
Maybe the snake is his actual true form.
Yeah, could
There's
be.
another thought. What about you, Trev? Any thoughts on why he changed to a Pookie?
No, to get away. That's the only thing I could think of.
I like the idea that he pulled it out of Roland's head or even the kid's head, because the kid, he just told the story to the kid, so the kid could have had that in his head.
Oh, that's very true.
I kind of like that. And Stephen King does like to use that. You know, we didn't see. I mean, okay, so technically we never see a full-on attack, right? The only attack we see is this scene with the gunslingers, and all the other attacks are told in third-person narratives after the fact. You know, so I mean, if
Right,
we
or
would
through
have
the
been
evidence
there,
when they're going through the crime scene, right?
mhm. And we did know during the Jefferson Ranch scene that he wasn't just one animal. He changed during that decay. He was like a bear, and then he started morphing into like a more
Just the
reptilian type
most
of thing.
poisonous like animal he could think of, I guess.
Maybe, I mean, we did see another were person in Mordred, and it was explained to us that he expends a whole lot of energy going back and forth. So maybe the snake was turning into a snake was a way of conserving
Easier.
energy. You know, no limbs or anything. He just has to slither.
I like that too.
Yeah, it could be. And then he takes the big blood meal to get his energy to be able to transform back.
Yeah.
I like all that.
It's good. Food for thought.
Yep. Um, very last but not least, we got Storm's over. Roland finishes the story. Storm's over. They pack up. They sleep. Early the next morning, Susan awakes with Roland already awake, and Susan asks the big question: what was the last line of the letter? Roland responds, she wrote, I forgive you for everything. Can you forgive me? And asking Roland if he did, and his answer strictly being yes. They head on to the town of Caliber and Sturgis, and we have an afterword. The most beautiful words within our known language is "I forgive," and that's where the story ends. Um, question: Roland memory plays a huge role, total within all of it, right? What is the impact of past to the present in this story? He's telling this story to his quartet. What, what does it really mean, though?
Is he asking them for forgiveness before he kills them all?
It's all
I'm
about
sorry, I'm
forgiveness.
going to kill you all. Please forgive me for all the shit I'm doing to you.
Them seeing, especially Susan seeing his humanity, more of his human side. Uh,
I like that.
it was almost a lesson in Ka, like trying to prepare his team to be like, you have to trust in the plan, you have to trust in meaning.
I like
Trust in
that
the chaos.
because you could say that's kind of the real purpose of the wind through the keyhole. Even though the real purpose is stated throughout the book, that meaning is lost it with me, like the way Stephen King
Just to
details
show
it.
how long he's been dealing with Walter, like been dealing with him since he was a kid.
I like that.
I thought I mean, forgiveness. The last line pretty much summed it up for me. That Roland's asking for forgiveness from his quartet. He's telling them about his story, his forgiveness with his mom. Us finding out that she knew of that he was going to kill her and let it happen, and basically and after she died, asking him for forgiveness, and also Stephen King himself asking forgiveness and forgiving the guy that hit him in the car, and himself whenever he was addicted to drugs, forgiving
Yep.
himself, like just
Because
forgiveness across the board.
officially this would have been the book that he was 100% sober for, like 100%, even though he had started to wean and nailed a lot of those during the last three books. No, this was officially in the series the first one that he was 100% just Stephen King. I like, both that.
Hmm.
In story context, this comes right after Wizard of Glass, right? And that whole story being like what he did to his mom and Susanna, going into the whole like, let's ask that. Why Jamie? Now that we're done with the, why uh, Jamie DeCurry? Well, why does Stephen Deshane and not Deschane, but Stephen Deshane send Jamie DeCurry on this mission with Roland? And I'd like to hear thoughts from, let's go with Phil and Trev first, but Phil, specifically you first. You haven't said.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. To be honest, I don't really remember the character.
Yeah, he's okay. So this is the second time we met Jamie. It's not the first. We actually met him all the way back in the very first book, The Gunslinger. He's there with Alan and Cuthbert, and he's just kind of not really talked about in that book either. He's kind of in the background. He was more friends with Elaine and Cuthbert. Trev, you got any thoughts into why his dad picked Jamie on this mission?
Yeah, first and foremost, they just got back from that harrowing event in
Magus.
yeah.
Magus.
So
Let's
that
say he does Stephen King, Magus.
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 Magus. Magic.
Jamie
Magic.
he also explains that Jamie's more analytical. Like he makes up for Roland's shortcomings as far as the detective part of it, even though, like you said, a lot of that was kind of MacGuffin-y, where it just kind of
And,
fell
and,
into place. But
and
he
to
was
be fair,
chosen, I
it's all,
think, less
oh,
emotions, more calculation, and then not having that baggage from being on the last one with Roland.
and incidentally, all being said, it's all Roland who does all the detective work. Jamie is the one he asks questions, but it's really Roland comes up with a plan. It like kind of figures out stuff, figures out the salty thing, even though the police had all that info right in front of them. Like he even brings it up, like, well, I got this map, but I'm not making anything from.
I think that has to do with the fact that Roland's telling the story. That if the story would have
Huh,
been from a different person's perspective, then Jamie would have had his own
a bigger
perspective.
role.
Yeah.
What you got, Steve?
Yeah, that's good. I like that. Yeah, I'm thinking that, well, Jamie did point out a couple of things that Roland missed. And Roland
He
was
did.
scolding himself, going, shit, why didn't I catch that? And he
Well, they
liked,
both missed the kid. Like that. That's one of the biggest oops. Like they went in and cleared a
yeah,
whole room, went off and did some other
clear,
shit.
clear. Nope, ain't clear.
Yeah, and then Roland went in there again and cleared it a second time. No, you talk about some bad gunslingery.
Well, they were young
Um,
too, right? They're still learning.
yeah,
That's
they
what
were
everybody commented about how
before they
young
had the
they were.
before they had the big guns, right?
That's right. They had little guns.
Aaron, what you got?
Pew pew.
Yeah, that's all. Yeah, I don't think I have anything else to add.
Come on, good readers. All right, so we just came back from Aegis, right? We're with Roland, Elaine, and Cuthbert, and they didn't go back to Gilead in like celebration form and fashion. No, they fucked up. Yes, they succeeded in like kind of stopping the oil, but they I mean, you're talking about Roland got his girl killed, got stuck in the grapefruit, like and like okay, so you're the king, right? And you're like, man, I sent my son to do this shit, and like, yeah, he succeeded, but he kind of fucked up. I mean, he's like fucked up in the head now. He killed his mom, like, you know. And I gotta send him on this other mission. I gotta get him out of this juke. How do I get him out? But what fucked him up on his last mission? Well, it was this girl. Now she's dead, so I don't have to worry about her. And what else was on this mission that fucked him up? Oh, is those two friends that he took on this mission. So this time, I'm not gonna send one of his friends with him. I'm gonna send this other, pseudo gunslinger. No, I'm being mean on Jamie, but
F them friends. F them friends.
basically, in a nutshell, that's like you have to imagine that's like, he's like, man, we need a succeed on the gunslinger's tally. Because the good man, he's gooding the man the hell all over Gilead over here. He's got like, I mean, every town Roland goes to in this story, people are like, these taxes, and a good man, he's talking about democracy and no, I want to believe like which is kind of like, you think about it, okay, like why didn't Steven go? Like, I mean, what's keeping him there? Like, Gilead's already fallen. Like, the good man's already on the march to go do his thing. Like, why didn't Steven go with him and go see his friend Hugh Peavy? Like, they were buddy, but no. But I want to chalk it like all that. Like Steven's real decision on. I can't send Alan Cuthbert. I want to
I
believe
think
that
it
Stephen
didn't it
King.
say it Stephen had to deal with Farson.
He did, and he didn't. I mean, Jericho Hill is right after this, but granted, that's after Roland gets back, because that's the next in the story events. This is the next thing that happens is Jericho Hill, which you don't get to find out unless you go read the comic books.
Another big disaster.
What's up, Caroline? How you doing?
So, Caroline?
Okay, so on to my next question. Does this book create any continuity problems after he's finished the loop?
Oh,
And this is
yes. There's one, and I forget it. Whoa. Oh, crap. There's one I was like, wait a minute. That's not possible.
there's a big one,
Oh,
and y'all
shit.
mentioned it a bunch.
Oh, my God.
There's a big one, and I hate I it,
I
it's
should have
it,
looked at
it it's right there. Y'all said it a lot, and it's like, okay, so if he were to put this, and this is 4.5, and then we got the next book, but in this book, it was like something that was plaguing our dude like for a long time. But if he came to this conclusion at this point in time, why would it be plaguing him? Like, did he forget about this story in between? I mean, didn't but there is one big continuity kind of flaw, because you could say there's a couple. You could say there's a couple, but really there is a big one. Anybody want to throw it out there? Wrong answers
No.
are okay. There's a couple. There could. I want to say there's a couple small ones, very, 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 very tiny, but there's one big one.
Is it something with Jake?
No, Roland specifically. I'll give you that clue. All right, because I can't. So the whole mom thing and him and the forgiveness, that plays a huge role all the way into the end of the book. You don't remember him climbing the towers and there being the rooms tormenting him on killing his mom? Why would that be there? If that was the thing, you're talking about his levels of the tower that he was going through at points of his life. There would have been a point to that life that level wouldn't have been there. So if he gave his mom, why is that there? No, that's a huge like, and I
the
love that
tower, though.
part of the book. I love the part of that book, like the forgiveness thing, and that he did forgive his mom. I love the letter, the way it's dropped in the book. Like, it's like, hey, and she gave me this gift.
That might
You
have
know,
just been behind a door on the tower that was behind the curtain that we didn't see, that he actually did look at, that
not
we
even
it
that.
just didn't explain it.
Oh, that's just a big reference. But we're talking about a Caliber and Sturgis. This dude brings it up. He still has the guilt of his mom. We're talking about in Song of Susanna. It's brought up. We're talking. It's still a major theme after that he killed his mom. The whole matricide thing. it's an ongoing, and it's brought up
Well,
numerous times.
that's kind of something that would haunt you, even if you forgive. That's something that would be part of you the rest of your life.
But like learning that she knew it, couldn't
Yeah,
break that, that's a difference. That's something that I think if he read that and comprehended. Now there's a level that states that maybe he couldn't think around the corner. No, but like in plain, pretty much simple fashion, like she states that yeah, that he was like sneaking and sniving. I mean, even the church tells Roland in this book that Martin Broadcloak had been to the church and was secretly like having these meetings with Gabrielle while she was there through the window. Like that's when all this was told. To me, it's a big issue because yes, you might have guilt for doing the action, but you wouldn't bring it up in story context with your like brothers and sisters. Like, especially if you can say you forgave her, that guilt wouldn't be there anymore. It would be up until that point, but to me, that's a big issue. Did you think about the other ones, Ewan? Because there's a couple other small ones.
no, I didn't write it down, but I remember reading something and I was like, that doesn't make any sense. I can't think of what it was.
I'm gonna go back to the wizard can't be in two places at one time. There's a scene that I just referenced just for this occasion, but we have a scene where Martin Badcock is supposed to be back at the castle, and the whole reason Gabrielle Deschain left was to get away from this wolf. How can he be at the abbey present during the time when he's supposed to be in the castle? That's another. It's two times during this book when it's referenced that can't be a thing. So it's either like you said before, it's like because Roland's telling the story that part has been added, like, or Gabrielle was just under a magical influence and Walter wasn't there, or Walter really wasn't at the palace during this time and he was just following Gabrielle like a shadow.
Hmm.
That's another small, but that one's physically referenced by the book and how a magical being can't be in two places at one time, kind of thing. And to the point where they reference it twice in this book, Merlin and
Well, time does move differently the closer you are to the tower.
it
So
does.
it's not the exact same time.
So I do have another question that goes into the small continuity error thing. Tim references a white tower and that he has to get to the white tower and that he'll do anything to get to the white tower. Well, what the fuck is the white tower?
On
Any
the other side
thoughts?
of the planet.
Yeah.
This
I
one time a white tower is ever referenced. Another tower in general that doesn't represent the dark tower, right?
Maybe the White Tower is just when you know, it turned before it turned into the Dark Tower. So maybe something corrupted it.
It was
they
back
didn't
whenever they actually cleaned it.
Yeah. They didn't pay their electric bill and the lights went out and it's now a
Hmm.
dark tower instead of light tower.
but yeah, I just thought
Well,
maybe it's just he's not in the same
It's a different
dimension
world.
or
There's more
plane.
worlds than
Yeah.
these.
nah, he's in the same because remember he's on the beam of the line.
Right.
He's not on the same beam as our quartet, but he's still
universe.
on the. No, but the white. I want to say that is a big mystery. Maybe it's something that he had thought of because it's something that Tim throws out like as he's like being chased by that plant thing, and it just comes out like in thought, like, "No, I'm gonna make it to the White Tower, like, and nothing's gonna stop me." What's up, Synthetic Panels? How you doing?
What if a gunslinger is the embodiment of the White Tower?
Working for the White, I can see that. There is one flaw with this though, because Merlin does reference the Dark Tower, like not in specifically, but like he does reference the Crimson King being stuck on the balcony, not in so many words, but he does reference him being stuck and not, kind of being trapped already. No,
He
you're
told
good.
them all the way at the top of it.
Oh, yeah. Which
It was
okay,
weird.
so This it also brings me to another question, right? Right on the heels of this, and kind of a weird one. Why throw in Merlin? And what does that like represent to the overall story of your knowledge of everything, like magic versus science? Okay, but you're the writer, Stephen King, not Fred King, Stephen King, and you're coming up with this story, and you're like, man, I gotta throw in like some end to this quest, right? And you're like, well, I haven't done anything from the old like Eld stuff. Let me just throw in Merlin. But like to me, it's kind of another big continuity error, right? Because like if Merlin exists within this world and isn't trapped or dead, um, where the f is he? Like wouldn't he be like some of the greatest help to the line of Eld? Like
He's
but to
retired.
me,
He was a drunk in a cave, and that was a story too. Remember?
They
That's the
got him.
fake story. That was a fiction
Yeah,
story. So
he's
that's
in the
when you tell
twilight
kids a
years.
fairy tale.
but why like out of anybody? I mean, we could have got a different character from another Stephen King book. We could have got. Give me your thoughts on like why use that character and like specifically for this time and story kind of thing, especially since most of the old Arthur L stuff isn't referenced outside of like the small connections that are referenced, like the painting or the.
Well, besides the fact that you just said it, that he's drawing a parallel to the Arthur L stuff that we've seen a little bit from this point. This point in the story kind of reminds me almost of like a fairy tale or like a fable where it's like, oh well, you've helped this helpless creature, but this helpless creature is really this all powerful wizard in this case, where like this creature is now going to grant you whatever you want. So I think it was kind of almost like a bit of a fairy tale element.
Yeah, genie in the bottle, right?
Yeah.
I like it.
It
Anybody
could
else
give
with your thoughts?
credence to the fact that this story is fiction.
Because it kind of, I mean, it goes both either way. I mean, you read the story and how do you know the Skin Man isn't fiction? Like, because
I
you
think that's
kind of.
more because Roland experienced that, and the other is just a story that his mom told him.
Hey, Bethany. But also, that's in context to him telling the story in general. So, if it's already from an unreliable narrator, what can you take for truth versus fiction?
I think
But,
it's
like,
not the
okay,
truth about the story, but the
context
meaning
within the
behind
story.
the story. Yeah.
I get that. What's up, Will? The
What up,
tower.
Will?
The
Um,
tower.
because it's such a small line in the book, but it does present kind of a problem because both are read to be like true. Like the Skin Man story is something that Roland experienced during his life. While during experiencing that, he tells the story that also happens to be based on a true story. Um, but maybe the part of the story that he told is a fictional story that's aligned with the true story kind of thing.
Though,
Because we do know that Tim does become a gunslinger and blah blah blah.
why is it when a new cycle starts, Roland forgets everything from the old cycle, but he can still retain things like these childhood memories? Like maybe that's why he maybe the fact that the ferryman kind of triggered it, and he was kind of like, oh yeah, I remember a little bit more about this now, means that he wasn't necessarily supposed to remember this whole memory in itself.
But the weird thing about the cycle, when it sends him back, it doesn't send him all the way back to his childhood. It sends him back when he's an adult at different times, and we don't know
Yeah.
where this tower keeps sending him every cycle. It seems like it's further and further along in his life when he gets shit right. Okay, we don't need to redo that. Okay, we're just going to do the parts you fucked up. Let's go do that again. Because he was in the
Because
desert
we
chasing the man in black, right? Not a child. That's weird how that happens. Why did they put him in that context? Like why is he still an adult? Why doesn't the tower put him right back to an infant and then being born again?
Mhm. Just like that's shown at the tower, we get to see his whole life from start of
Yeah.
infancy. Um, I want to contribute. It has some bigger meaning to the hidden mysteries that we haven't uncovered yet, kind of thing. Um, I do have one final question though, and it goes back to such a minor character, but such a dope character, right, Daria? And we get to meet this little personal guidance system that eventually like befriends our main character during the wind and the keyhole, Tim. Um, as she guides him during this journey, gives him useful information. But as we see, Directive 19 comes up quite often, and specifically every time Tim asks about the Stark Blasts or about Merlin in general. Why? Back to the if Walter is doing all this, right? And Walter gave the disc to the Faganon, and like I get the chaos, but like why have a marker on the storm and him being Merlin? I get you want to hide the cat's Merlin, but why prevent him from knowing about the storm? Why Directive 19? Now there is an answer to that. The other two, maybe.
Interesting.
Yeah, I didn't think about that.
The Directive 19, I can tell you, is to, directly correlate this story to our current loop, right? It's the only thing in the reference with a number reference that actually referenced 19. But that does signify, like, it lets the reader know that this doesn't take place on another rolling loop, which would have been cool. It
It
would have been
wasn't the
cool.
only reference to 19. There was one earlier when the
No,
kid
it
was
wasn't.
walking through the
Yeah.
woods
Yeah,
and he
it's
was
not.
counting the steps. And then when he got to the Covenant Man, the last round of steps was 19. And
19,
then
yeah.
he got to him. That was kind of
Um,
cool.
no, but it is like kind of letting the reader know that that this is taking place during the same loop because we do know that there is another loop right behind this. So this could have been during loop 20. That all that would have taken would have been for this Daria to have been like Directive 17 or Directive 22.
That's right.
Um,
Could have been.
now the answers to the other one, like why the directive on the Stark Blast and Merlin, I can't tell you either or because I can't tell you why, like Walter wouldn't want this kid to know that it was Merlin, because he eventually does what a kid should do. He saves him and gets his reward and everything. And I don't see how like if Walter really thought he was going to make it that far, like why worrying about that? I mean, you're talking about he had to go through a dragon, some alligators, like a plant looking, tribe to like anybody that would have looked like some monsters. But then literally monsters after that. We got birds, which are like these big poison rats that are the size of bloodhound dogs. We have these like 4 foot tall poison mushrooms that you can't even get close to, or they like poison your skin. We have this massive plant creature that has more than 1,000 foot stretch. Um,
Yeah, and,
so
and she warned him about all of those and was not screwed up with Directive 19, which was funny, eh? Because
so
he
like
asked directly about the mushrooms. Can I eat these? And she said, no, that's poisonous and
no.
it'll kill you.
So
That's
why?
weird. It was very
Magic.
selective on what he was allowed to
Magic.
talk. Yeah, had to be.
Magic?
Magic.
Explain magic.
Well, magic's leaving the world. How do we not know that the Man in Black and the Crimson King aren't trying to keep it? Because the original great old ones were trying to fuse science and magic,
Hmm.
and when one of those components goes awry, the other one is out of balance. It's all about balance. So they're trying to keep magic. They imprison them, trying to keep Tim from reaching him to keep
I
that in
like
balance
I
with him.
like that being an objective of the red. That makes sense. It lines up with everything we know within the story that that the Crimson King would be trying to eliminate magic to try and, that makes sense. So why send this kid to possibly unlock this dude?
I think the Man in Black's just his own thing.
Chaos.
Like that. I mean, that's a MacGuffin answer.
Yeah.
There's got to be a legit where like we're not. It's just something that's escaping us because okay, here's another thing: the wind through the keyhole. One of y'all tell me the meaning of that pertains to the story.
Ka. Just a lesson in Ka.
I mean, I know
With
what Stephen King
time,
says about it.
the
That
flow of time.
that the wind through the keyhole is like an infinity of influence. Yeah, I know what he says about it, but what does it really mean? Like when okay,
Stories,
no, wait, there you go.
the
Say it.
stories through time. Just like
So could you say is it like a story about the importance of stories?
yeah,
Because
a
like, and I
wind
know
through the
this.
keyhole, or stories that maybe could be missed or used to
Well,
get
wind through the
through to
keyhole.
unlock doors like other
Wind through the
doors.
think of that in like material terms, like a wind through the keyhole, and like what they represent. You touched on it, like it's something small and it was insignificant, right? Because like wind through a keyhole is like nothing. You don't see it. You don't. Okay, so like the significant with the story within a story, and how much the reader misses as they're reading.
I
Almost a
took it.
reference to.
I,
Oh,
I
go ahead.
took it more as a meaning of fate. Um, you could build a big wall or a door up, but at the end of the day, Ka is going to sneak in whatever way it can. In
I
this
like
case,
that.
through the keyhole.
I like that. It does it. That does that. Cause Ka is like a wind, right? And when it blows, it blows.
I thought it was fitting
Um,
that it ended talking about Roland and his mom, reading him all these stories in a tower.
Or you could lock yourself in a door and the wind can still get through.
I like that.
Mm.
What about reference to the tiger in a cage and the tiger being a magician? Famous. Anything to that? If you go
Secret
look at,
room.
I know, like, this guy over here has got like an impressive cover for the book, but most of our covers have like the tiger on the cover in the cage, in relation to the wind through the keyhole. Any thoughts on that part?
I really thought about it.
Open a door, and there's endless possibilities on the other side into
I
your
like that.
imagination, pretty much.
Actually, it's pretty close to what I had. Yeah, but with different word. Yeah. Taking that leap of not necessarily faith, right? But just the leap can lead to tremendous, amazing things, kind of thing. I mean,
Take a chance.
Tim's whole story is structured like that. I can't say Roland's is not really. Roland really doesn't take any chances throughout the story. It's all methodical, thought out. Okay, Tim, on
Structured.
everything he does is a leap to the point where he's even in the Faggon swamp, leaping from you know crazy. I don't know how are you seeing that in the dark?
Chasing that thing.
Yeah, like with just the light of the sig, and he's in a swamp, and I don't know about y'all, but I grew up real close to a swamp in Houston, Louisiana. And I'll tell you what, no, I ain't making no boulders in the. Stephen King had some other kind of childhood, you know what I'm saying? Magically jumping from mysterious boulders, and yeah, and I do
Well,
love
swamps don't
that.
work like that, do they?
Now, Especially rocks around water. They usually have like this thing called algae, and they become like really slippery and like. Um,
They're really gross.
I will
One
like
thing
to
about
say
this
another. Oh, go
one thing
ahead.
about this book that I did like going back and reading something that's already been completed, kind of just another piece, is that my mind was putting pieces together and drawing conclusions before they were revealed. Like, for instance, I wanted Tim's story to be tied to Farson. I wanted them to somehow tie that together. Whenever Tim left the clearing and he was just amazed by the sight, first thing that popped
Yeah.
into my head was the Dark Tower's right there in front of him.
Oh, that would have been dope.
That would
The
have been
things I
dope.
didn't think about. Okay, so incidentally, it does heavily tie to Farson, just not in the way you're thinking.
Right.
So, and I can explain this real quick, but it's the tax thing. The tax thing comes up a
Mhm.
lot when it's relation to how people were so easily turned to Farson. And this book kind of like demonstrates like how heavy, well, I mean, not necessarily, but it kind of tries to demonstrate how heavy the taxes were and how these people might have changed, sides easily and basically, money. My whole
And
thing is like that whole like kings and queens, and why are they taxing like cities away from cities? Like they don't live in Gilead. Like this is 3 cities away from, like where Gilead some shit. Like damn, bros. That's like Texas taxing California. Like
the last thing that I really wanted to be true, I know it's not, but when they referenced his mom telling him all the stories in the tower, the first thing that popped into my head was, what if Gilead turned to ruin and the tower that he was told all the stories in is the Dark Tower?
That's pretty cool.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
that actually
That's
could
deep.
be a deep cut in the explanation because we want to assume it's a loop, and a lot of people have that like, oh, he's stuck in hell theory or stuck in purgatory. Well, I've explained it; those don't match up, but it could be something like that, right? Because I mean, it could be like a crazy psych evaluation, and after the loss of his massive kingdom, he's just isolated to this one, left tower that just happens to be dark, and he's making up this whole journey as we go, kind of thing. And that's why
Hmm.
it's stuck on the loop because he's just constantly retelling himself the story. I actually like that. That's more thought put into that than a lot of the other theories I've heard, actually, and that would be hard to contest, right?
Trev, you got to write to Stephen King. Say, hey, you got to go back and fix this.
Overall, what are your thoughts on the book? How did y'all like this one compared to the other books? That kind of thing, especially the, for the old readers, the first time you read this kind of thing, did it at the end of it? Did it exceed your expectations? Because mine were kind of low going into this book. We had already finished the main journey, kind of thing. I took it for exactly that, a there and back again kind of story, like hey, you like these characters, you want to spend a little more time with them, and that's kind of so my expectations were not that very high. So what did y'all think about the book after completing?
I mean, I thought it was good in the sense that it brought a little bit more insight into Roland, but the whole thing kind of felt to me just kind of like a side quest. Um, I thought that the Tim's story with the story within the story at this point really was the more interesting part of it. But it got to the point where somewhere I forgot about the Skin Man, the Skin Walker,
Yeah.
and then when they finally got him, I was, oh yeah, I want to see how this plays out. And
Right.
unfortunately, like I think all of the major battles, with the exception of the one
No,
with
they're all
the
quick, buddy.
Doctor
They're all
Dooms, yeah,
they're all quick.
Doctor Dooms and the vampires. It's like quick and done.
That I mean, because and I mean, this is the real answer
The
to
demon
that.
bullet. That was a
Right.
pretty good one.
And this is the real answer to that. And it just strikes true, but that's real life, like, the shootouts in real life are not that long. It's usually like pow, pow, pow. And then, that's it. People are dead on the ground, and that's
Nah.
okay. Yes, there are sometimes, but in real life, usually, a stabbing is because quickly the guy's trying to do what he needs to do, get in and out, rob the person, um, movies have made these showdowns a lot more epic than they really are, kind of thing, especially western shootouts, like, you really
I was
think two
gonna
guys went to high noon, and was like, all right, you draw, no, you draw, all right, and
I was gonna say I definitely would not choose this book to do live action. Um, I would if I did a live action, I would definitely put this book. Maybe I wouldn't do this. Um,
actually, I would, just not movie form. I would love this in TV form because it's kind of drawn out like that. The steps, the structure,
I
like,
just think the other books are better, would be better live action
oh yeah,
than
oh
this
yeah, oh
book.
yeah,
Yeah.
oh yeah.
Oh,
Oh
100%.
yeah, this is
Yeah.
definitely like after you finish all that shit. Then you're like, hey, I got this other stepchild that we could, no.
This kind
Um,
of feels like, if you're to keep it like with comics, if you're buying and enjoying a main series and then they come out with an annual.
right, right.
Yeah.
That's kind of exactly how it is, right?
Yeah.
Steve, what about you?
Oh,
Muted.
Mike muted.
You muted,
His voice
Steve.
is muted.
Am I muted? Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
muted. I just enjoyed the story. I found it very entertaining.
Me too.
Just overall, after I finally got pissed over my being pissed off at it the first time and quit it, when I finally went back and actually read the book, I found it really, really entertaining because I like that whole idea of the story within a story at first, like the way how he executed it, and then how he kind of put it into the continuity of the rest of the books, and how he could keep doing this with other parts of the book if he really wanted to. So I was almost thinking, like, at the end of this, maybe he's just after money or something because he's doing like Lord of the Rings, where he could just
Hey,
like
you
throw
don't say
prequels
that.
all over the place.
You watch your mouth. Fred King is none.
He's not about the
Eric,
money. No, of course not. He's all about the story, right? He doesn't care about the cash.
he's about money, but I will say he's a lot more flusher than he is, than he was, back
Back in the
then.
day, 19.
Aaron, what were your thoughts after reading?
I'm just I'm glad that he made another book. Like I think the fans probably everybody wanted him to do more. I wish he would do more stories. I didn't think I was gonna like it when I'd heard that it was a fairy tale. I'm not big on fairy tales. I'm more of horror and sci-fi type
You're a what?
fantasy, and
Break him
but
up a little bit?
scary. But it actually made me like it, like Phil Steve was saying. Just I like the structure of the story and everything about it. It had like little interesting things that kept me in it.
I want to say I loved it. Not as much as all the other books, of course, but for what it is, there and back again. Like I said, I read this really shortly after, completing the series, just like how we did now. And after reading the last book, it did hit me, like, I mean, I love Susanna's ending, and I mean, but it hit me on an emotional level that I wasn't ready for, kind of thing. So for one, it was hard to go back to Midworld, kind of thing, in that regard. But at the same time, I was one of those people that wanted more. Like, I want that 20th loop. Like, I want that to be a whole another like 3 or 4 books. What are you waiting for? You cash money one. My money's right there, ready. Come on. So yes, and to me, it does exactly what I kind of wanted it to do, was to add more lore into Midworld, not necessarily Roland and the quartet. We got a lot of that, and I can do with more of that. I'm fine, which we don't get a lot of that, but we get more of like mid-world, like creatures and bards and evil, and like you're talking about the explanation when Tim, and it's real brief, but he explains one of the other creatures in the forest being this bird that's so quick, like it accidentally flies through people and it like literally kills one of the other woodcutters. There's just a hole in this dude's head because this bird just flew right through him. Like some scary shit that lives in that forest. Like um no, but the whole like journey, because that's my favorite part of the book is the whole fantasy part with Tim and the wind and the keyhole. But like actually having it connect to like the Arthur and the Eld part with Merlin, like kind of finding out what happened to Merlin, like why he wasn't present during the whole story or any of the like kind of current uh gunslinger tales kind of thing. Hey, Christina Payne. Um no, but I'm of the nature that I love the story. The more you can add and you can give me, I want. That's why I was hardcore into the comics because there's more you get out of that. I mean, if this dude did a musical right now, I'd probably be first in line to check out, just to see if there's new content or um. So I'm hoping he gets off his butt and then gets around to giving us some, because in my opinion, there's a lot of different story arcs that you can take us with. You could do the older gunslinger story and how they created the tech corporation and what they did during that time and the fights that they had to fight. You could tell us a whole another story about Tim and what he did as a gunslinger. You could tell us a whole another story about Merlin and what he did after he got freed. You could, I mean, you could tell us, like, I mean, to me, in honest regard, there's a lot of different side paths that if you wanted to, I mean, even from a made up standpoint, and there's a couple gunslingers we haven't even, you two have not met yet, even though we finished the main books. There's still a female gunslinger that's from the comics and Wizard and Glass. I'm drawing a blank at her name because she's kind of brief. But Roland does mention Devon and book two, and it's the only time he references it. It's just a one time thing, but still, it's another gunslinger that you could give us a story on, kind of thing. Um, so no, it's not one of my like all time favorites in the series, but I do love the addition and how it's presented. After reading that last story, I kind of needed a buffer, and it works real nice as a buffer. Like, oh, there's
Uh oh. You just
Mike,
cut out.
yeah.
Your mic just cut. Well, my opinion on the book, the first, I actually didn't like the book until the last 5 hours. It was a 14-hour read on the audio, and the first 9 hours of it was so slow. I was clawing my eyes out. But the last 5 hours, it picked up pretty good. Like Mike said, my favorite thing about it was my favorite book is Wastelands. And I think the
Yeah.
problem with Wastelands was the fact that they didn't have a lot of creatures. And Stephen King likes to introduce a lot of characters, and it kind of leaves you like, why are you introducing these people and not giving us backstory? But he's kind of skimps on the creature element, I think, especially like in Wastelands. So
Yeah.
I got a lot of satisfaction in all the different creatures. And then at the very end, I mean, seeing Merlin was cool, and then the letter with his mom, I think, kind of tied up the entire series almost.
first off, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yep.
I do, you know.
We're
Okay,
back.
okay. Sorry about that, folks. I kind of pulled up my headset too hard. I will agree that I mean, really, the second half of the story is I love the Skin Man part and everything, but it's I mean, really broken down. It's so small and fundamentally like I mean, it's a cool story, but in its root, there's not a lot in it out of it. Like, I mean, it's not like Roland does anything specifically cool during it, new. Like, no, it's really the fairy tale, the creatures, the world building, but like the ending and the letter, the whole like forget. Even though it is kind of a continuity error, but I do like the whole like that we actually get that with him and his mom. kind of thing, tying it back to the whole series, and redemption just playing a huge part of the whole series in general, kind of thing.
Mhm.
Aileen Ritter is the girl gunslinger.
Aileen, that's her name. And that's why I'm not forgetting that, because that's my first wife's name.
Uh-oh. Good thing she's dead.
Not
Yeah.
Ritter, not Ritter, um, but my ex-wife's name was Aileen. Um,
She
and
is
she's
the
got,
niece of Court.
yeah, she is kind of cool. I mean, she's
Oh,
I
that's
like
cool.
I like Aileen.
Does she have his personality?
Yeah, she does a
To
little
some
bit.
degree,
She
yes,
trains
yes.
gunslingers.
She's
Awesome.
more like a very aggressive, like, gunslinger, and then it's
Yeah,
kind of
because she
cool
had to
because she's
prove
tiny.
she had to prove herself, right? Because women weren't really gunslingers. So
Just kind of paved the way for
I
Susanna to
know.
take it.
I think it was
But wait, say
portrayed
that
that
again.
Court trained her in the comics and kind of did it in secret and kind of hid
Yeah,
it
he did it in secret.
because it was
Um,
frowned upon. It wasn't outright said that women can't be gunslingers, but it was frowned upon.
frowned upon, yeah, and it has to do with like more on the superstition of it. But like, she was not the first or the last female gunslinger. We met two other female gunslingers, and
Yeah, we
in
did.
the last book, but she's not the only. She's just the only one that he's given us, kind of thing. But it is something new because she leads into Jericho Hill, kind of thing. So it is kind of cool to get a retelling of Wizard and Glass with some new stuff in there. Some stuff that happened right around the corner from where you were. Well, that is this episode of Wind Through the Keyhole. I want to thank my esteemed panel, my quartet. Yeah, it's a fantastic discussion. I always look forward to these. Your responses, your thoughts, your opinion. This has been fantastic. Every single one of these has just blown me away. It's like a dream come true getting to talk about this stuff, especially with other people that enjoyed the story, kind of thing. Now what's coming up? It kind of depends on the quartet and people like you at home. It depends on where we go. We might tackle the comics yet, which I have an idea how we're going to do that, or we might go into some of the other, you know, related Dark Tower books like Insomnia or Talisman, something like that. It really depends on
The
my.
Stand.
It really depends on the Tet, and
Is it your favorite,
what.
Steve?
I like The Stand. That was good. I read that a
That's one of
lot.
mine. I love the Stand.
Hmm.
Um, but so be looking out for a posting. I'm probably doing probably after I talk to our quartet and see what they are willing and want to do. Then I'll put a poll, come up with the best, whether the chat would rather see us discuss the comics or the books, kind of thing, and we'll go from there. Because I know there are some other people in the community that want to hop on board, for some of the books and the comics, kind of thing. But
Cool
guys,
thing
that
about the
is this.
comics,
Oh, go
if we
ahead.
do
Go
the
ahead.
comics, we can show pictures to the audience.
Exactly,
Yeah,
exactly,
Yeah.
and
a few
and
of us have almost have them
I
all,
actually
don't we?
have, I actually have formulated a way we will do it, kind of the same way we broken down this episode, but we'll go into more detail when we choose that path, kind of thing. Well, I'm gonna go into detail backstage,
Awesome.
but for the people at home, haha, you gotta wait. But guys, that is this episode. If there's anything that anybody wants to throw in specifically about this book or how anything related to the whole main loop, you know, now's your
Hey,
time to chime
thanks for
in.
doing this, Mike.
Yeah,
Really enjoyed it.
that
It's
was a lot of
fun to
work.
be part of a group, talk about something different. It was fun to read. First Stephen King I've ever read. So thank you so
Thanks.
much.
Yeah.
That's cool.
I'm looking forward to delving more into it. And like I've said a couple times now, I kind of have a mixed feeling like, hey, I kind of want to see what Salem's Lot's all about. I'm like, well, I guess I kind of know how it ends already. But yeah,
Do
no, I'm
you?
definitely interested.
I
Or
can
do I?
tell you, yeah, I can tell you that Father Callahan's part in Salem's Lot is a very small part in the book. He is a major character in the book, and everything is verbatim what happened in Salem's Lot. But for instance, he's not the main character in Salem's Lot. It's actually Ben Mears and another kid, and they're more like vampire hunters in that book. and Father Callahan is just like a tool that they use along the way. So don't take what we know from this story as like, oh, I know Salem's Lot. Nah, 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 nah. He just told you his part in the story and like some of like what he knew after it, kind of thing. That's a great story too. I'm not gonna tell you that the bad. I to date, yes, I'm a huge Stephen King fan, but I can know when I've read a bad story. I have not read a bad Stephen King. I will say there's some ishy-washy endings, but I've enjoyed every story I've read. I've read a bunch, like
Yeah.
30 plus.
And either way, I showed you I have the beginnings right next to me. I'm anxious to jump into that at some point too.
Oh, that's coming soon. All right, guys. I want to thank everybody for showing up. Everybody that stayed with us. Everybody that watches this on the rewind. Your comments are very much appreciated. But guys, that is it. Be on the lookout for our next episode whenever that happens. I don't know. We'll talk about it. But guys, the tower.
The tower.
The
Long
tower.
day.